First thing on the agenda is Robyn Socio from the Compensation Board. Robyn has been a member of the Compensation Board staff since 1990 and has served as the agency's executive secretary, a staff director position that reports to the chairman of the Compensation Board since January of 2007. Prior to this role, Robyn served as an assistant executive secretary for 2 years, and she is the agency's budget and finance manager for 8 years. Over the years, she has worked closely with sheriffs and Commonwealth's attorneys on special projects such as the development of staffing standards and career development programs. Currently, she also participates as a member of the Board of Corrections Liaison Committee, the Center Advisory Group of the Center of Behavioral Health and Justice, and the Policy Committee of the Secretary of Public Safety and Homeland Security's Offender Population Forecasting Process. Robyn holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Economics from Virginia Commonwealth University and a Master of Science degree in Criminal Justice, also with Virginia Commonwealth University. She is a 2000 graduate of the Virginia Executive Institute. Please give her a warm welcome.
Good morning. So nice to see everybody in person. I know you guys have been here for a couple of days, so you're probably now used to seeing large groups of people in person, but it's really nice to be able to present at a conference that is not sitting in front of my computer at home with various animals and children running around. So it's really good to see you all. Realistically, I know you all haven't been working from home, so that's not your situation, but it sure is nice to have things feel back to normal. So again, good morning, and thank you all for the opportunity to be here this morning. I'll talk to you a little bit this morning about the Compensation Board updates, talk a little bit about the budget and other things going on at the Compensation Board. It's been a couple of years since we've had an update on the budget, although certainly during this time there's been a lot of back and forth from a funding perspective, and certainly you all have had a lot on your plates in many areas of your responsibilities over the last year or so. But I am pleased to provide some update about the budget following all of the uncertainty of the last year, that there were actually additional funding items included in the Compensation Board's budget this year. These items were initially in the budget when the governor introduced it in 2019, got all the way through the session, and then as you all know, everything was frozen, kind of went by the wayside, but it came back in December of 2020 and made its way through the legislative session. And there were a lot of things for all constitutional officers, which is unusual. Typically, you all fare the best. And while you did have things in the budget, other constitutional officers had things in the budget as well. So that was nice for us to finally feel like we were able to allocate some new funding. It was also a super busy time for us this year because it's been a while since we've had so much of that to deal with it, but all good news. So the first thing I would mention, of course, is the 5% salary increase that the General Assembly approved effective July 1, so just in a few weeks. So while we'll be increasing our salary amounts by 5%, I do want you all to keep in mind, that this might vary a little bit in your offices based upon how your localities handle those funds. So for example, we'll increase Compensation Board salaries by 5%. Your salaries, those of you that have supplements for you or your employees, may not see a full 5%. The legislature does not require that localities increase their supplements by 5% when we increase our base salary by 5%, but your locality does have to use those funds to at least provide your employees all with the equivalent of an increase of 5% on the comp board amount. So there could be some variation depending upon supplements and whether or not localities provide those. As an example, you might have a locality providing 3%, and that's the same as 5% on the comp board amount, and in that case, that would still be okay. Also, we're in the second year of a biennium. We did not provide an increase last year, so if your locality did, then they can use that increase that they provided ahead of time to offset some of the 5%. But I just want to make sure that you all understand those nuances so that if a locality is just saying, well, we're just not giving it to you, that's not in keeping with what the legislature requires. So we can talk about that afterwards if you're having any kind of problem with that. But 5% on the comp board salary from the General Assembly is huge. We haven't seen anything like that in a really long time, and we're excited to be able to move that forward. One of the things I wanted to mention as well, and this doesn't hugely impact your offices at this point, but the legislature did approve, not at the most recent session, but at the session before, changes to the minimum wage in Virginia. Generally speaking, all of compensation board salary scales are set above, minimum wage, but there were some positions in some offices that were underfunded and fell below those amounts. As these changes in the minimum wage occur, we're moving our salaries up. Some of your entry-level administrative support positions, while right now they are, those base-level salaries are exceeding the minimum wage, as the state starts to move up each year, we're going to be able to move our salaries up as well. So that will be those will be additional increases, at least for your administrative support, coming down the road over the next few years. We were able to get all of the compensation board funded positions, identified as positions that also needed to meet those minimum wage changes that the state is implementing. So it's not a huge impact for your offices right now, but down the road, I think certainly for your administrative support staff, where those salaries are below what the new minimums will be, we'll be bringing those up as well. So we're looking forward to that opportunity to have increases in those areas where it's typically been really difficult to get support for raising those salaries. I know many of you have localities that supplement those funds, and in the case of minimum wage increases, also bringing up salaries of your administrative support, the localities aren't going to have to pass that funding along. It's going to sort of offset their supplements, but it would be a good opportunity for you all to at least be aware that that additional funding is coming to your locality and to kind of use that to help get if they're offsetting supplements, to get that money for your office for something else or work on supplements in different areas. So just to let you know, even if it doesn't increase what your folks are making, it's offsetting money that the localities are putting in, and that's a good chance for you all to make sure that you're getting that back in other areas of your office. So a couple other things related to funding from the legislature. I'm pleased to report for fiscal year 22 that there was sufficient funding to continue all those that are currently participating in the Master Deputy programs, as well as the Sheriff's Career Development Program, which includes the individuals who are accredited or or meeting the criteria of the Virginia Sheriff's Institute certification program. So all of those that certified that they met those criteria by this last January in their budget request, we were still able to bring into the program for fiscal year 22. However, because there was no new funding approved by the legislature for these programs at this point, we have been able to bring everyone in that newly certifies, but it has been through attrition, which means other folks among your membership retiring or no longer meeting the criteria of the program to allow us to bring new people in. So it still is going to be a push for us in the future as you all continue to have folks either accredited or being certified by the VSI program, that we will need additional funds in the future to keep bringing new folks in as long as attrition doesn't keep up to fund those folks. So it looks good for fiscal 22, but it's something we're going to need to keep working on. The General Assembly did also approve funding for additional positions, and they approved funding for us to allocate this year 29 court services deputy positions, and that's for service of civil process and courtroom and courthouse security. I'm not sure. I don't think we've seen additional positions for court services since probably 2008. And I'm not even sure if we saw them then. So it's been quite a long time since there has been any focus on the court services deputies staffing standards, and so that's good news as well that we were able to allocate additional positions. I do want to mention that this was done based upon prior year's data. We know that most of your offices had some significant shifts in workload in the courts, obviously with the courts being closed for a few months and things not really returning back to normal, probably quite yet in the courts. We did not use the calendar year 20 data for courts. It just wouldn't have made any sense. So we did go back and look and, identify where there were upward shifts, but we did not want to penalize anyone for downward shifts. Obviously, there was a lot going on, things totally outside of your control. And so we wanted to use data that we knew was stable for that allocation. Also, I do want to mention we have, some of you are familiar with a position reallocation policy, which says that when your data under those staffing standards has you kind of fall below the level of staffing that you have now, you could be subject to losing a position under reallocation. We did not do any of that this year. We also asked the board, and the board approved a moratorium on the reallocation policy for fiscal year 22. So that essentially means no one will be getting letters from us saying you're going to lose positions. In fiscal year 22, we're going to wait until we see that data has stabilized to see where everyone is. So if you're in a locality where things have been in decline from a workload perspective, that doesn't mean you're 100% out of the woods just because you don't hear from us this year, but we for sure want to be sure that we're looking at data that makes sense and that things are back to normal before we reinstate that policy. So just want to kind of let you all know that. Finally, the General Assembly also approved some budget language. I know that you all talked a little bit yesterday about the Marcus Alert System. There is budget language that the legislature approved for us this fiscal year for us to review the plan that's being developed by DCJS, outlining law enforcement agencies' roles and responsibilities, excuse me, and engagement with the development of the Marcus Alert System. So they're required to have that plan developed by July 1, which is just in a few weeks. Then the language that we have directs us, once that plan is complete, to survey your offices to determine what staffing and training needs you might need to meet the requirements that are ultimately established by this plan by DCJS. So we'll be working with your association. John and I have talked about that to complete the survey, and we'll be providing a report to the General Assembly by November 1st. So once we're able to see the results of that plan, then we'll be working with you all to try to identify what needs you may have to meet those requirements. Just a couple other things that I'll mention to you all this morning. Couple things. One, we are, over the course of the next year, embarking on sort of an update to our coin budgeting and reimbursement system. It's not going to be a massive change. There are other changes that we'll need to make over the coming year as we look at policies for how salaries are, salary administration efforts that you all can take within your office at the state level. We've changed how we do things in terms of the limited percentages for increases and that type of thing. So we'll be looking at some of those changes, but the coin system itself, we're removing off of the mainframe platform. So we probably won't make a lot of changes to the system itself in the course of the next year because we'll just be working on what's called a refactor, which is where you recode everything and move it to a new platform. But then that'll give us some opportunities to make some updates and policies that aren't as complicated while it's on the mainframe. So while it won't be an immediate shift for you all over the course of the next year, it will give us some opportunities following that sort of refactoring to be able to do some other things with our policies and update things a little bit better. Finally, for those sheriff's offices with jails, a couple of years ago, we talked about Medicaid information and the LID system, the local inmate data system that you all record all of your data in. we talked a couple years ago about a data exchange with DMAS between the LID system. DOC also has a data exchange with DMAS. Those plans did kind of get put on hold for a couple of years. I know it took a little while for DOC to get off the ground with the data exchange with DMAS. And then when it was time to get our portion, the jail portion of it rolling, then the pandemic hit and everyone's resources kind of went elsewhere. But that data exchange and that Medicaid screen in the inmate data system is now up and running. There are a few things that this is going to do. I know that most of you probably that have jails are already familiar with working with DMAS and the Cover Virginia unit to get any folks that you have that are hospitalized enrolled in Medicaid to cover the costs of those medical expenses while an inmate is hospitalized. But what we're doing is exchanging LIDS data with DMAS, meaning that all data for inmates that are currently in LIDS will go over to DMAS and they'll send it back with information about their Medicaid ID, all of their enrollment information, their aid categories, their status, changes in coverage, effective date of coverage, and any cancellation or renewal dates in case your staff needs to work with DMAS and getting those things updated. There's also there will also be some information fed back into LIDS about where the inmate, previously received Medicaid services, any disability onset dates, those things. So that should be a place where your folks can go in and see if someone who has come into you maybe has been incarcerated before and their information is already in LIDS with regard to Medicaid. So the way that this will work is all of the data has gone over for inmates that are currently incarcerated and then come back to LIDS. Every week there is a file that will be sent to DMAS, so anyone who comes into your facility in the course of that previous week will shoot over to DMAS and come back with their Medicaid information. And then it'll also send them releases, et cetera. But you should be able to see, or staff in your office should be able to see those folks and their Medicaid information. So there are 3 different access levels that were set up. We are initially going to put everybody in the view-only mode. And once we get everybody up and rolling, then we can start to look at some of the other access modes. So just to kind of talk to you about it a little bit, there will also be access allowances that will allow you to record if an inmate refused to apply for Medicaid, as well as additional fields to track the history of their eligibility. You'll be able to update information where there wasn't a perfect match between the system and have it go over to DMAS and come back with their Medicaid information. Or if you already have their Medicaid ID, you can put that in and the system will send you back that information. So these are some updated functionalities that you all are going to be able to have access to. I'm also telling you this one just so you know that it's now available and that we can start using it. But secondly, because we have updated our LIDS course user agreement, those of you that are checking your email this week while you're here will see that we sent an email out yesterday. We have a new LIDS access users agreement, and there is an appendix that relates to security requirements that DMAS has for health information. So you all will need to identify the individuals that continue to have LIDS access, and then also identify at this point one person that you want to have access to that Medicaid information and send that back to us towards the end of next week. What we'll be doing then is any individual who's going to have access to that Medicaid information in your jail needs to go through security training that DMAS is providing. So we'll be gathering your information about who you want to have that access. We'll be shipping it over to DMAS, and they will set those individuals up for training so that they can complete the security training. And once that's done, then we can set up their access to that Medicaid screen information. So again, that's something that we've been working on for quite a while, but it is finally ready to roll. And so I just wanted to give you all a heads up about that communication you received from us this week. And the last thing I just want to mention this morning is that I want to thank you all for your patience. We've been transitioning with staff over the last couple of years. That is, I'll ask for your continued patience because that's going to continue to happen. Most of you, or at least your staff, worked with Joan Bailey for quite a while, and Joan retired a few years ago. And then Bill Fassell, who was a longtime comp board employee, came in to work with your offices. Of course, Bill is still there. Joan has actually returned to us in a temporary part-time capacity over the last year. Unfortunately, this is not a permanent choice. She did that to help us out while we were in transition with some of the employees in our other section. And we have a new employee who started last year, named AJ Scepter, and some of you all may have spoken with him. So, Bill is still supporting your offices and the other constitutional officers, and he'll continue to be there. But our biggest news is that Charlene Rollins, who is our longtime customer service manager, is retiring. So I'm sure some of you have spoken with her. She's really run that unit for a very long time. In fact, she's our longest serving comp board employee. She's been with us for over 35 years, and she's always been in the customer service unit. So it will be a big loss for us. We've been working really hard over the last year on as much knowledge transfer and brain dump, but you all know that's just not 100% possible. We will be bringing in another person to support your offices in addition to AJ, as Joan won't stay forever. So it definitely is going to be a transition for us, and I just ask that if you run into any trouble, getting the information that you need, please don't hesitate to reach out to Bill or to me. We'll still be there and supporting you all, and those of you that have worked with Charlene over the years might want to just reach out and say, hey, enjoy your retirement. She technically doesn't leave until August 1st, but I think she'll be out on vacation all of July, so we'll definitely miss her, and I just ask for your patience, as we go through this. I know some of you all are experiencing mass retirements too, so you certainly understand. This really does wrap up all I wanted to speak to you all about today. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, I'll be around for a little bit. If anybody wants to talk to me individually, that's fine too. Anything I missed or questions you had? No? If not, well, I thank you again for the opportunity to be here. Really nice to see people in person, and good to see you all. Thank you.
He's here.
He is here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Robyn.
Here a minute ago. Make sure he's here for you.
Is our next speaker, Alan Gearhart, in the room?